All right, folks, we got to do this one all over again, which, I mean, it's good and bad. It's fun to do these steals and busts episode. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I am Dan Vespers. You can find me on social media at Dan Vespers. You can also follow at Old Man Squad on social. That's the network feed, and it'll follow you back. It'll follow you back, so you'll get a free follow out of it at the very least. Please do hit the like button. It's a big deal on YouTube. Gets us into that, algorithm recommended stuff. Subscribe if you like what we've been doing on any channel, no matter how you're taking in the content. And if you have 45 seconds to hit that 5-star review button on Apple, I know that takes a little bit longer. Spotify, if you've listened to an episode, it takes all of about 6 seconds to do it. That would really help us as well. Quick little preface before we get into it. We have indeed done a show like this before. We got through, I think, the first 4 or 5 rounds, and then Yahoo changed the board about 6 hours later. Oh, in the moment, I was like, well, I could pull this episode down, but it was still entertaining. And also, you could sort of trace the thread a bit of the players we talked about a week ago, pre and post Yahoo Shuffle. So the names will be different on today's episode. A lot of them. There might be a couple of repeats, guys that either didn't move that much or went from steal to bust if they moved too far or something like that. But overall, we're going to be looking at guys that I think are values in each round, and we'll go for about 35-ish minutes, something like that, and see how far we get. So let's go ahead and dive right in. We'll start in the first round, not surprisingly, and actually, because of Yahoo's board shuffle, the first round got better. They've done a better job of it. Kudos to you, Yahoo. You got a lot of these players closer to where they should be. And for that reason, there is only one, in my opinion, value play in the first round right now. Yes, we all want to have Wemby. We all want to have Jokic. It's great to get a top 2 pick, and Luka and Shea will be fine. And, guys like Halliburton will probably underperform by some amount, but they're probably still going to be safe. And Embiid is going to be a per-game monster, but he's very unsafe. And Giannis is your punt guy. If we eliminate, and what I'm trying to do on this show, as I pull up Anthony Davis's face, because he's going to be the guy we talk about, what I'm trying to do on this show is to highlight the guys that I think have a chance to beat their pre-rank, both on a per-game and a totals basis, without something weird happening. And so in the first round, that's why my only steal is Anthony Davis. AD is a terrific per-game guy. He showed basically that last season with a reasonable offseason to get himself rested, coming into the year at good, in good shape, and the team, frankly, needing him to play because they were quite bad without him. AD was number 4 on a per-game basis. He played in 76 out of 82 ball games, which made him number 3 by totals. And he opened up as the number 7 guy on the Yahoo board and dropped 2 slots. And that's what I love about this recent redo for Anthony Davis. He fell a little bit deeper, such that, and those that are watching with us, you can see the other names around him, Embiid moved in front of AD. As did, Anthony Davis was 7. He and Embiid flip-flopped. They basically just traded places with Jason Tatum staying where he was at number 8. So Embiid moving up the board took the value out of Embiid and put it on Anthony Davis, who is probably a little bit less of an injury risk than Embiid. I know that AD had those 2.5, 3 years that were really rough after the bubble run, but I don't think his body ever really fully recovered from that bubble run. That was crazy, because they won the title and then the season started a month and a half after that. It was nuts. There was literally no time at all for these guys to get themselves back in working order. And so a guy like AD, who's very, very tall and, a lot of legs and flies through the air, there needs to be that recovery time. And now he finally had it, and he had a really good year. But again, the guys around him, like Kevin Durant at number 10, that's fine. Embiid, you could call him a steal because he's going to beat the 7 pre-rank on a per-game basis. But also, that requires me planting my flag in, Embiid is definitely going to play 64 games or more, which I really don't know, and I don't think that's the case. So in my eyes, it's kind of impossible to call any of these other guys steals where they're going in this first 12. And the only name that I would consider calling a bust is actually Tyrese Halliburton, who I think is going to have a really tough road to get to number 5 on a per game basis. I think he's going to be around number 10, 11, 12 per game. But if he's healthy, he gets up near number 5. And again, drafting someone in the middle of the first round who finishes towards the back end of the first round is not a bust. That's a near miss. And a near miss doesn't really kill your fantasy team because the other guys you're choosing around Halliburton are probably all going to finish pretty close to Halliburton too. And Trae Young, I have a tough time. And same with Giannis calling a bust, because if you're drafting those guys, you're doing it with a specific build in mind. Giannis, you're likely punting free throws. Trae Young, you're likely punting field goal. Now, if you're shooting for full straight 9-cat, like a 9-cat roto league, then your honorable mentions in this first round on the bust side are Giannis, because he basically has no chance to be a first rounder when you're trying to win free throws. He's an honorable mention bust. And Trae Young is an honorable mention bust because he pretty much has no chance to be a first rounder if you're not punting one of his worst 2 categories also. But again, if you're drafting those guys, you're likely doing it to build around what they're good and bad at. It's typically more a head-to-head type of thing. And that's, honestly, why in the first round, we kind of need to have a steals bust show that's for roto and one for head-to-head. So quickly, to recap the first round, your only steal for all formats, in my eyes, right now, at least, before the board shuffles again in 2 weeks, is Anthony Davis. There are no busts in all formats. There are a couple of busts if you're going 9-cat roto, and it's Giannis and it's Trae Young. But that's, again, only if you're going 9-cat roto. Second round, there's a little bit more to talk about. I got 2 steals and 2 busts in the second round. We'll start with a steal, and that is still, this is a repeat offender, James Harden at number 18. I love James Harden because last year in 9-cat, he was number 26 as the third fiddle. He took 11.5 shots a game and only 5 free throws. He averaged 16.5 points and 8.5 assists with good steals, blocks, and rebound numbers, good threes numbers, high free throw percent. Just jack all this stuff up. Harden going back on, playing time and usage steroids this coming year. He's going to get a lot of what Paul George leaves behind. Think about what Harden would have been like this last year if he was getting 17 shots and 4 free throws. He'll take more free throws than Paul George because that's just how his game handles. But Harden, 11.5 shots, 5 free throws, 8.5 assists. Give him the Paul George level of usage, maybe even a tiny bit more, because, again, there's only 2 guys now to sort of split it with, 2 star-level players. And Harden's going to jump up the board. So basically, the end of the second round is the floor for James Harden right now. And I don't think it's that crazy to think that he goes back to doing kind of what he did in his last year in Philly, which was not this most recent season, but the one before that, where he took 14.5 shots per game and had almost 11 assists a day. That number's probably not that high because he won't have Maxey, an up-and-coming Tyrese Maxey, and an established Joel Embiid near him. But I could definitely see assists going up to 10 instead of 11. Points should jump quite a bit from 16.5. I would think that he's back up around 20. And that year in Philly, James Harden was amazing. The 3.5 turnovers, the only thing that was sagging him a little bit, but he was terrific. Big-time fantasy lines from Harden that year. He was number 17 per game. He only played in 58 ball games. That was a weird season. Everybody kind of took the games played situation off. Like the whole second round was in the 60s. It was weird. In any event, I'm not that worried about health with Harden. When he wants to play, he typically plays. He was already getting mad in Philly. He was about ready to ask out, so you could weigh that in on everything. So, 17th for Harden feels very doable. Very doable, especially when you consider the fact that a couple of guys that were in front of him that year, like Jaren Jackson, probably doesn't belong ahead of him. Jimmy Butler, probably not ahead of him anymore. Steph, unfortunately, probably not ahead of him per game these days. Porzingis isn't going to play the first half of the season. Like, there's 4 guys that might just clear out and make Harden number 12, 13, 14, something like that this coming season. So I love James Harden. I think he's a good steal in the second round. And my other one is still Damian Lillard, who, again, if you want a deeper analysis on this, you can go to the last episode where we talked about the second round. But he actually moved down 2 slots from 21 to 23, which is delightful because Dame this past season was number 25. Again, Porzingis is just gone for the first half of the year. De'Aaron Fox added DeMar DeRozan next to him. Maxey added Paul George. I'm just listing players that were in front of Dame this year, where basically he doesn't have to do anything different, and he'll move up 3 slots. That gets him to 22. So already now he's 1 ahead of his mark. And that was shooting 42.4% from the field, which, again, like, we don't know that it's going to come up, but that's basically a low watermark for Dame. So odds are, if it goes anywhere, it goes up. If it doesn't and stays the same, then you get him pretty close to his floor. I love drafting superstar level players at their floor, and that's what you can do with both Harden, I think, and Dame in the second round. And both these guys showed nice durability last year, so I don't know that we're coming into this season with any sort of concerns around them. And people are like, oh, the Clippers, they're going to tank after they fall out. They're going to be fighting for a play-in spot the whole damn season. I think that team's in a perfect spot to have their guys play down the stretch. Before we do the busts in the second round, let's take a very brief stoppage for our first commercial break. Second round busts. 2 repeat offenders on this one, so we'll keep it somewhat brief. Kyrie Irving at 14. He moved the right way to Kyrie's credit. He went from 13 to 14, but this just isn't late enough. And this is a math equation. First of all, Kyrie played 58 games again last year. He pretty much hasn't cracked, 75 to 80% games played since like the Cavaliers days. And I know there's been an assortment of reasons for it, but assortment or not, he doesn't play a full season. And you're like, well, Dan, why didn't you clown on Joel Embiid in the first round? Well, the difference there is that Embiid, you're able to get sometimes still at 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And you could be getting the number 1 player in fantasy. So for Embiid, if he plays 62 games this year, he easily beats his ADP. Kyrie is going to need to get farther than 62 games because you're drafting him at 14 and he's probably going to be like number 9 or 10 per game. That just isn't a big enough jump. And I know what you're saying. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dan, the jump for Embiid from 8 to 1 is 7 slots, and the jump for Kyrie from 14 to 10 is 4 slots. Why is that so different? Well, because the guys at the top of the board are separated by larger chunks. Even once you get to the second round, the players are a lot closer together in value than the top of the first round. So Embiid in 62-ish games beats his ADP. In 62 games, Kyrie doesn't. Kyrie was number 27 last year in 58 games. You can do the math a little bit. 62 games would get him probably to the early 20s, meaning he still needs to cover another 6, 7, 8 slots. So you're looking at Irving probably getting to about 67, 66, 67 games to beat his ADP. 65, 66 might get it done. That's tough. There's no room for gravy because he ain't getting better than that. You're not getting 68 out of Irving this year, I don't think. My other bust in the second round is not an injury-related one, and that's Jalen Brunson, who's just going too early. And I know he had an incredible season last year. I would never downplay that. And we just did a Knicks review episode over the weekend. So if you want, like the 8-minute version of what I'm about to say in 90 seconds, Brunson took 21 shots a game last year. When Randall was healthy, he was at 18 shots per game. Now they have Randall healthy, OG Anunoby starting the year healthy, and they brought in Mikal Bridges. There's just no reason at all that Brunson should have to do as much as he did last year. 21 shots got him on a per-game mark, very close to where he's being drafted right now, which, again, is at, where is he now? 21. So basically right on the mark. By totals, he was very good. He's number 16 by totals. He played in 77 games last year. But we're talking about a guy that was number 29 while taking 21 and a half shots per ball game. I don't think that number's going up. If anything, that number is going down. And so Brunson, to me, if the Knicks are even reasonably healthy this year, 25 is the absolute ceiling. I don't like drafting players in the second round that are above or near their ceiling, and that's what you'd have to do with Brunson right now. There is an outside shot that he ends up as even money, but I don't think there's almost any chance per game that he comes close to beating this. And then by totals, you're going to need max health to get there again. Third round is relatively quiet in terms of steals and busts. I have a very risky steal, and I have a very points leaguey bust. Wait a minute. I skipped over a name. Nope, not a points leaguey bust. That's the fourth round. Sorry, guys. I got ahead of myself. And they are right next to each other in the middle of the third round. The steal is still Kawhi Leonard, who is much less of a steal because he was ranked 45th. And as he was the fourth round steal of the century on the last Yahoo board, he's now a third round medium-sized steal because, and you guys know this, my hot take this year is that Kawhi Leonard is a top 4 per game guy. It's not that nuts. He was number 6 this past season behind Embiid, Shea, Jokic, AD, and Luka. And I think there's a decent chance that he passes 2 of those players. Although Victor Wembanyama is going to come storming in. Top 4 is going to be tough. Top 5 would be a much easier thing to say about Kawhi, but I needed to make it a hot take, so we went top 4. I think Kawhi Leonard and Victor Wembanyama each pass Shea and Luka in this coming board, and maybe Anthony Davis, who, by the way, I still like a lot, even if I think a couple people pass him. I just think Kawhi is going to go from 17 shots and 4 free throws to more like 19 or 20 shots and 5 free throws. And if you just power boost his efficiency, he's an absolute Goliath. Because right now, he was about 0.1 assists away from being a positive fantasy player in all 9 categories. It's possible, probable, that turnovers becomes a small negative because he's not going to be at 1.8, having to do more. But I don't care. And we talked about this over the weekend. When the ball is in your hands, there are 6 categories at play. 6 out of the 9. The 3 that aren't are rebounds, steals, and blocks. Those are the 3 things that are not impacted by you holding the basketball. Points, threes, assists, both percentages, and turnovers are impacted by a player holding the basketball. Kawhi has great percentages, both of them. Very, very good. So not only is he a boost in points, threes, and assists if he's holding the ball more, he gets another big positive boost in the other 2. So every little bit of usage for Kawhi is a large jump forward. And for turnovers, a very small jump back. So that's why I think Kawhi could actually be number 4 this year. I don't think it's totally insane. I know the health stuff is a mess. And if we get into training camp and he's not playing, I reserve the right to retract. But he's a situation that's even more intense. Like Embiid, I thought was close to like kind of being scales of justice equal on risk versus reward. Kawhi, to me, still the reward is higher than the risk because a guy that's being drafted in the 30 range that could be top 4 per game. Like, here's the thing. A good example of this is Joel Embiid last year. He played in 39 games as the number 1 player in fantasy. By totals, in 39 games, he missed 43 games. He was still a 5th rounder by totals. So we're talking about Kawhi Leonard really only needing to get into the 50s in games played to break through that 30 barrier. He was able to break through the 45 barrier in the 40s in games played this coming year. So 30s, it's going to take a little bit more. But if you think Kawhi has any chance of approaching 60 games, he blasts through this. If he gets into the mid-60s, he's probably a 1st rounder. Totals, not per game, totals. That's why I'm still in favor of doing it. And DeJounte Murray went down the board as he should, but he didn't go far enough. He fell from 24 to 29. He's still one of my possible busts here. Instead of a late 2nd round bust, he's now a mid-3rd round bust. The thing with DeJounte is he has a shot to beat this by totals, which is what he did last year. He was number 38 on a per-game basis last season as the number 2 guy in Atlanta. He was number 23 by totals, but that took him playing 78 out of 82 ball games. Okay, if you want him to beat this number by totals, he's got a decent shot to get there. But he goes to a place where the usage vacuum is harder to fill. Because with Atlanta, it was like, okay, well, Trae Young can't play every minute of the ball game. And then whenever he's off the floor, DeJounte, you just get to go totally crazy. And even when they're on the floor together, you're going to get to do some stuff. With the Pelicans, there's a lot of guys. There's Zion, who's going to be the max usage dude. Then there's Ingram. There's McCollum, who's still going to be doing stuff. And you've got DeJounte. And there's going to be a ball sharing thing going on. Maybe the steals come back a little bit, but I don't like betting on a maybe. DeJounte is not a positive in percentages, so it's not like that can float him. He's a pretty good rebounder for a guard, but he's going to a place that, like, is that going to be a big part of it? Could assists go up? I actually don't think so. Because they're going to run a lot of offense through Zion, and they'll run some offense through Ingram, and they'll run some offense through DeJounte. And so, again, you're talking about a guy that was late 30s per game last year, that, like, the odds of him going up, the only way he goes up is if his steals go from 1.4 to 2, and then it sort of doesn't matter what the other stuff was. But then he becomes a little bit more of a specialist, which is probably not what you were hunting for with him anyway. Good steals, yes, but specialist steals, I think DeJounte finishes this year in the 40s on a per-game basis. And so, again, what I was talking about here, like the steals, guys that I expect to be worse than their pre-rank or better than their pre-rank in both. Busts are guys that I expect to be worse in both. And for DeJounte, like if he misses 7 or 8 ball games, he doesn't break that mark. Let's keep shuffling along here. We're only at 20 some odd minutes, so I think we got time for a few more rounds. 4th round steals and busts. This is players are starting to move a little bit more now, so you're going to get some fresh names in the mix. 4th round steals and busts. Your steals in the 4th round, and there are 3 of them, so we're going to have to hustle in this one. Freddie VanVleet is the first one. He moved down in the latest board adjustment from 34 to 38. This is a guy who's a 2nd rounder per game. I have no idea why he's this late, and I have no idea why he's moving later. This is an obvious one. Freddie VanVleet, easy peasy. Jalen Williams at 43, in my eyes, is another obvious one. He's a 30-something ranked guy, even if he doesn't do more than last year. Because, again, I know you're like, Dan, he wasn't the 30s. He was 41 last season. Yeah, that's because he had a month and a half to start the year where he was around 50, and then he was like 33 the rest of the season. He could get into the 20s per game this year, and it would not be that crazy or surprising. I love Jalen Williams. I expect his role to continue to increase on that team because Caruso comes in as a lower usage guy. Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are the number 2s behind Shea, who would like to, I think, do less night to night. So expect Jalen to take at least the 14 shots he got last year, maybe a tiny bit more. The steals could come up. You never know. The 3s could come up. He's just an amazing, well-rounded player. I love Jalen Williams in the 4th round. And the other 4th round steal is, again, a math question, and that's Jimmy Butler at 46. This one could burn us, and frankly, I don't think you should take Kawhi in the 3rd and Butler in the 4th if you're not in a games cap format. That's kind of maybe potentially too much risk. But the thing is, Jimmy Butler going to miss about 20 ball games, and last year he was number 26 per game because his steals were about as low as they've been in recent memory. He's starting to add a little bit more at the three-point line. I wouldn't count on it, but you saw a little bit of an uptick there, especially come postseason time. But if Butler's steals come up from 1.3 back to 1.5 or 1.6, that's how he jumps up the board. We've seen him as a mid-second rounder many, many times. I wouldn't be that surprised to see guys move around near Butler and Jimmy maybe just do the tiniest bit extra and jump up to, 20-ish. But the fact that he's getting drafted in the late 40s gives this massive injury buffer again. I don't want to rely too much on the fact that he is now playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. Miami hasn't extended him. I don't want to call it a contract year, but I'm sure he's looking around going, you guys are going to insult me? Jimmy Butler? He seems like just the kind of player that would play angry. So maybe you get an extra 3 or 4 games out of him. Or maybe you just get angry Jimmy for the same old 62, 63, 64 games a year. But either way, this late, with that giant per game leap, I think you've got enough of a buffer that, last year, a good example. He played in 60 games, which is not very good. admittedly, at late 20s per game rank, he was number 54 by totals. So, like, in what felt like kind of a bad case scenario, he still only missed his 46 pre-rank by half a round. So you're getting a guy, again, at his floor. Couple of busts in this round. As many times as I go in circles around it, I can't get on board the Paolo Banchero thing. He could continue to get better, but his free throw showed no signs of getting better season over season. In fact, it went down by 1.5%. Field goal went up from 42.5 to 45.5, and maybe that improves a little more, or maybe it stays exactly the same. Either way, he's a high turnovers. He was at 3.1 last year, low percentages guy who doesn't go crazy in defensive stats. And by the way, I don't expect that to change all that much. It's not like Paolo Banchero is magically about to become a new player. He's not a huge steals and blocks guy. That's okay. That's who he is. Those things don't usually flip. If you're drafting Paolo, you're doing it here in a points league. And the numbers bear this out, because if you're punting turnovers last year, so 8-cat, he jumps to number 98. Not horrible, but obviously nowhere near number 37. If you're punting turnovers and free throw percent, he jumps to number 57 last year, which again, fine, but still not in the fourth round. If you are, however, punting field goal, free throw, and turnover, he was number 42 last year, and he finally gets to the fourth round. So this is truly a points league only spot. That's Paolo Banchero. You just, like, as I mentioned, I'm leaving out the guys that are build specific, like Giannis, like Trae Young in the first round. Those guys are not busts because you're building them with ignoring, most likely, their worst category. But with Paolo, you've got to ignore 3, and that's just too many. Like Cade Cunningham or Alperen Şengün. These are other good examples. Does Şengün get to number 32 per game in 9-cat? Probably not if his free throw number still stinks. But you're drafting Şengün, and you're probably not worried about free throw. Cade might be a similar thing. Cade Cunningham, you're probably not worried about turnovers or field goal. Or both. If you're not worried about both, Cade was, 35 last year? Field goal, turnover, punt. And the second half of the season, when he actually got his game together, punting both those things, what is he, 20s? Something like that. Pretty good. In any event, those guys we're not talking about because it's not fair. It's just not fair. Fifth round, only one of each in this one, so that'll save us a little bit of time. Your fifth round steal is, I'm saving time while I scroll down the board to collect him, Immanuel Quickley at number 55. Shout out to Red Bauer for kind of talking me into Quickley being a good pick at this spot. Last year, once he moved to Toronto, and we did a Toronto preview over the weekend. So again, if you want the 6-7 minute version of this, that's where you can go. Down the stretch, Quickley was number 26. It's not going to be that good because Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett will be back to actually do stuff for the Raptors. But even when everybody was together, Quickley was still hovering around number 50. I don't know that he's going to go too far beyond that when the team is healthy. So a healthy Raptors team that Quickley probably ends up what I've referred to on recent shows as a very, very small win. Baseball analogy, just an opposite field single or a walk or something very quiet that helps. But if anyone misses a moment around him, that's what we saw. The extra shots, the extra stuff, the extra assists. Every time a player's out, Quickley will roll top 40, top 35. Every time 2 players are out, he rolls top 25. So that's the built-in for Quickley. That basically the floor is very close to where you're getting him. Floor is probably 65, 70, which is very close at this range. And the ceiling is, does anyone miss a minute? Does anybody take a game off? If not, he probably finishes right around where you got him. If so, he ends up as a pretty big win. My bust of the fifth round is Brandon Ingram, who I cannot, like, he just keeps going at this spot over and over and over again. And in addition to being a massive injury risk that for some reason gets a pass consistently, he's just not the guy that for one season was a top 50 fantasy play. Remember that one year, I think it was his first season with the Pelicans after the AD trade. He had like 1.3 steals, and we were all looking at it like, what the hell? His free throw, his three-pointers, his steals all went up. None of it made sense, other than free throws. That's a thing that players adjust year over year. And sometimes guys extend their range a little bit. But the steal profile, he's back down where he has always been in his career over the last couple of seasons. And so basically, Ingram is number 90. 75 to 100 range, year over year over year. His percentages are good. His points are good. His assists are good out of a power forward, small forward spot. His rebounds are fine. His threes are low. His steals and blocks are low. His turnovers are a little bit high. In 8-cat, he has an outside shot at this rank. Sure, why not? 8-cat, he was number 60 last year. So, if you're punting turnovers, this is okay. But again, that's not an upside play, and he's not a guy you're building around foundationally. So why would you take a guy that you have to be ignoring one category to get him to his spot? On top of the fact that the Pels brought in DeJounte Murray. So if I'm fading DeJounte Murray on the notion that he's going to do less, you kind of have to fade Ingram on the same notion. And so I will. And I forgot to put his face up on the screen. Sorry, YouTubers. Whoops, clicked on the wrong guy. Brandon Ingram is my bust of the 5th round. I don't see how he gets back even to where he was last year. Which is funny, too, because normally I like the percentages guys. And Ingram is one. But he's constantly overdrafted because he scores. And people just assume he's something he's not. On top of the fact that, dude hasn't played a season of games in a while. Forever. He had like a 70-something with the Lakers, I think, one time, and that was it. So, nay. No. Pass. Get out of here. Let's keep going. 6th round, and now we're starting to, you split hairs a little bit, because what do you call a bust? You'll notice that I almost don't have any busts on my board. There's 4 the rest of the draft, because, what's a bust if you draft them in the 80s? You drop them. Who gives a crap? So in the 6th round, my steal is Tobias Harris. Still at 64, I think he's a steal. He was an unbelievable steal where he was before, which was 81. At 64, I still think he's one. Because Tobias has one of the most fantasy-friendly stat sets out there. He's a low turnovers guy who's basically a positive in everything. He is not in real life. What I'm about to say would sound insane if I was talking about it in real life. In fantasy, he's Kawhi Leonard without the right number of shots. If Tobias Harris got to take 18 shots a game like Kawhi Leonard does, they'd pretty much have the same fantasy lines. I know you guys think I'm crazy, but extrapolate it. Tobias Harris took 13.5 shots a game last year. He averaged 17 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists, a steal, 0.7 blocks on 49-88 splits with 1.3 three-pointers. Kawhi Leonard last year took 17 shots a game. He was at 23 whatever points per game, 2 threes, 6 boards, 3.5 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.9 blocks. Okay, so Tobias is not going to get to 1.6 steals. 52-89 splits. Not that far apart. What's the difference? Tobias is going to rebound more. Kawhi is going to get more defensive stats. There's your difference. It's not going to happen. I'm not saying Tobias Harris is about to get 17 shots a game this year, but he's probably going to get more than 13.5 because he's in Detroit with a bunch of guys who's, sorry, Detroit, kind of suck at basketball, or at least at scoring, other than Cade. So Tobias can go out there and be like, great, I get to go take 15 shots a game this year. So he'll be better. So 13.5 shots becomes 15 shots. How much does that really matter? Well, for someone who's efficient, a good amount. Because the other stuff will stay somewhat constant. So bump 17 points and 1.3 three-pointers up to 19 points and 1.6 three-pointers. And you get a better positive in both percentages out of him. That's how you jump around. I don't think it's crazy at all to think that Tobias Harris finishes this year inside the top 40. I don't think that's crazy. I really don't. And like, he's done it before. Not in the last 2 seasons because he was competing with multiple other superstars, but he did it in Philly. 2020, 2021. He was number 28 while taking 15 shots a game. Ta-da! My bust. I kind of wanted to make it Julius Randle, but I'm not. I'm going to go Yusuf Nurkic at 69. And I get it. There's a little bit of a punt element going on here with Nurkic, and I said I wasn't going to do the punt thing. But Nurk was also number 112 last year in a particularly healthy season. That's 9 cat. If you were punting free throws, he jumped up to number 62, which is basically where he's being drafted. But again, you're talking about ceiling. 60s is the ceiling for a punt free throw Nurkic, in my eyes. He also has a much more capable backup this year. Nurk only played 27 and change minutes a game last year, and he didn't have a particularly capable backup. They got Mason Plumlee out there now. It's a deeper team. In every respect, Phoenix is deeper, so they need less out of Nurkic. Does that mean he's going to do less? Not necessarily, but odds of him doing more is extremely low. So I would say Nurk either replicates last year or gets a tiny bit worse, which, again, if you're not punting free throws, this is a hell no. If you are punting free throws, you can do better. Like, you can get guys that are punt free throw Nurkic types 1, 2, 3 rounds later. You can get Jakob Poeltl later, who's a punt free throw guy. You can take some swings later on with guys like Walker Kessler or Derek Lively or Mitchell Robinson or Trace Jackson Davis. You don't have to spend a Nurkic pick on it. You can shore up your other non-bigs categories in this range. So I just don't see that much of a reason to go down that path. 7th, yes, he is in the 7th round. I almost messed up the math. 7th round bust is Clint Capella. I don't know what the hell he's doing at 74. This is a move that I don't understand. He was number 91 on the first Yahoo board, which felt like kind of fine for Capella. He's number 59 if you were punting free throws last year. And he's another guy whose job is going to get smaller. So Capella played 25, almost 26 minutes a game last season. He was also relatively healthy, played in 73 out of 82 games, and he's just going to do less and less. We've heard rumors that Onyeka Okongwu might start. We know Atlanta wants to trend younger. Capella is very much still, for the 3rd year in a row, on the trade block. There's just absolutely no reason at all to spend a 7th round pick on Clint Capella, who, again, is going to do the exact same stuff this coming year as the players we just talked about. Walker Kessler and Trace Jackson Davis and Mitchell Robinson and Derek Lively II. Don't spend a 7th rounder on him, even if you're punting free throw. Take care of the other categories, because there are punt free throw bigs available after 100 in droves this year. And if you're not punting free throws, well, then he's a clear 2 rounds ahead of where he should be anyway. So, fart sound effect. Let's keep going. I went Capella first because he was first. I actually think, and this might be the one that you guys can argue with me the most on, I think Bradley Beal is a steal in the 7th round. He's finally, in my eyes, going as late as he should go. He was not healthy at all last season, which is a big downer, and I'm sure a reason that everybody's going to be freaking out about Beal. But he's number 72 per game on the season after a truly awful start to the year. But the second half of the season, Beal only missed like 4 games, and he was number 56 per game. And if you want to go even tighter to the end of the year, the last 2 months, I believe Beal only missed 3 games, and he was number 29 over that stretch. He is a terrific roto player in his role in Phoenix. Steals, blocks, assists, threes, points, field goal, free throw. Like, he does it all. The question, of course, is health. But again, if we're talking about a guy that could legitimately be a top 40 and much more easily top 50 per game guy, we create another buffer where 62, 63 games or more, He probably beats his ADP. And then, hell, maybe we get a half decent health season out of Beal. Maybe we get like 67 games out of Bradley, and he blows his ADP out of the water. So that's why I think the math now tips in his favor. I liked him more at 85, which is where he was on the last board, than I do at 77, but I still think you got something there. And he's one of the rare guys in that range on 9cat boards that I think could actually beat his number by a good amount. Honorable mention this round, by the way, was D'Angelo Russell, who was, like 55 to 70 range most of last year with minimal fluctuating. I don't think there's a ton of room for growth on D'Lo, and there is the possibility that he gets traded, so that's why I left him off. But he's kind of the honorable mention in this group. We are now at 40 minutes, so we're going to just squeeze in some lightning round action towards the end of the show. Your 8th, we're into the 8th round now, right? Yeah, 75 to 86. Your 8th round, there are bust? None. Your 8th round steal, Jonas Valanciunas. Your 9th round steals and busts. This runs from 87 to 98. Jeremy Grant is the bust in there at 94. There is no steal for whatever reason. Oh, wait a minute. Did I screw that up? Was there no steal or bust in the... Oh, there was no steal or... No, that's right. I screwed this up. The 8th round steal was Jonas Valanciunas. The 8th round bust was Jeremy Grant. Okay, I messed up the numbers on that one. So JV was your steal in the 8th. Grant was your bust in the 8th. The 9th goes from 97 to 108. Busts, I still don't believe fully in RJ Barrett or Jalen Green. Your steals in this group, I think Herb Jones beats that pre-rank, as does Alex Caruso, mostly on steals. Ivica Zubac is my favorite steal in the 9th round. Bogdan Bogdanovic is my second favorite steal in the 9th round. Steals in the 10th round. There are 3 of them. OG Anunoby, Mike Conley, Colin Sexton. I have no busts in the 10th round. And then, of course, you've got Okongwu, Kessler, Lively, Mitchell Robinson, all of those centers that have certain upside and downside. I don't think either one is a steal or a bust because I think you're building different things, and there's that sort of upside-downside situation. And 10th round is where we will pause. If you guys want more than that, you can go watch my sleeper show. I did that on Friday, which is all the guys I like after pick 100 and explanations on it. Like, I think so. Mitchell Robinson got an explanation there. I like him after pick 100, but I also realized that there is an exceptionally low floor, and that's why he's not on the steals department. Because what if he only plays 45 games? What if the Knicks bring in his center? There's a lot of things that could derail him. What if he shoots 39% at the free throw line? Too many things that could derail him. So that's why he's not a steal, but he is, in my eyes, a guy that you take a shot on in that later range. I would rather have, as I just said a second ago, Anunoby, Conley, Colin Sexton in that range. These are guys that I think beat that mark per game and totals. And I don't feel as confident in some of those centers. And that's why that to me is the difference between calling it kind of like a sleepers show versus steals and busts kind of show. Phew. That was a load, wasn't it, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Dan Vesperis. Please make sure to please like. I did a lot of work on this one. Please subscribe as well if you've been enjoying what we've been putting together on this thing. My voice is going this morning. That's weird. Need a sip of water. Got to have some water to close this thing out. At Dan Vesperis on Twitter, at Old Man Squad. Please, again, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. Thank you to everybody that continues to do it. We saw some unbelievable growth in the month of August. Let's make September? You know what this month is called. Let's make it even bigger. See you guys on the next show. I don't know when it's going to be. And have a good Labor Day, too. Okay, bye-bye.